yesterday.
No, no, no. Well, he died last year.
Yes.
He died last Christmas, yeah.
Yes, I know, but
In Stockholm once.
Yeah.
No.
Annick, how do you prefer us to start with the family members or with the 19th century?
Oh, I think that absolutely family members, and I think that we take the letter earlier on only if there is time and if we are not too tired, etc.
Okay, yeah. So may I then ask perhaps Andreas first. Now, you are a blood descendant of the Wittgenstein family. Your mother,
my mother, yes,
yeah, Clara Sjögren, was a daughter of Helene Salzer.
correct.
So you are a grandnephew of Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Yes.
I know that nobody living today has met Ludwig, and my questions are not about Ludwig, but still he seems to be the most famous member of this family, and it is interesting for everybody to understand his way of thinking, not his philosophy, although philosophy comes from the thinking, but the background. He was a very strange man. Everybody testifies to that. And now, could you just tell me whatever you remember of this family, of the atmosphere,
Philip, come here.
the sort of culture of this family?
Sorry. Me.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, no, he said it in Cambridge to some colleagues.
Il aurait dit qu'ils étaient fiancés.
Ludwig.
Et tante Marguerite.
Oui, mais c'est pas étonnant.
Annick.
Ta mère.
Yes.
Ah, okay. But what sort of person do you think she was, so that somebody who could get so close to a character like Ludwig?
I don't know. She was a perfectionist, had a strong character, but it was always important to, I mean, an example, perhaps a ridiculous one, Annick and I, we were there as guests, can't remember which year, and we had dinner, and it was very sort of formal, and the waiter came and said, dinner is ready, and we went into the dining room, and Marguerite slipped. So one helped.
That's Philip. Philip has lived that dinner. It's Philip who has experience.
Yes, well, all right.
Yeah,
He
so
can
ask,
correct me. Yes.
Ask Philip now.
But do you remember how?
Absolutely, but I can tell Radmila about that story separately.
Anyway, she didn't, of course, she didn't say, I have very severe pain, but it was obvious she couldn't walk, so it was bad.
Yeah.
And she had, and in fact, she had broken her femur, I think.
Oh.
And she was a perfectionist, good looking, well off, everything correct to the last little detail. I can imagine that Ludwig rather liked it. Did they have any sort of sensual relationship? I don't know.
Can I
Yes.
tell about our last meeting with her?
Yes.
Maybe after that accident, we drove through from Hochheit through Switzerland to France and stopped at who's Christina and André was the daughter, and she took us to her mother, who was in a home because she had been yes, probably that accident, but no later because she was very old then. And Andreas talked with Christina, and I talked with
the daughter,
Tante Marguerite, and she started talking about Ludwig. And what I remember, she said, Ludwig, yes. If we could talk for hours or hours. So I came to his room. I lied on the bed. He sat on a chair next to me for hours, and we talked. And we talked, never about philosophy, never. And, but you know, I went to the concert with him very much. But you can't marry a man who, when he takes you to the concert, he has got a hole in his, what it was with.
That's perfectionist Marguerite. Yes.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, but then historians have written much more than we know. And another thing about her is that my mother-in-law said about Marguerite, when we had a family celebrations, probably Christmas, which was so important, things like that, or others. And the brothers and sisters were there, and Ludwig was there. When Ludwig was there, everything was complicated. But if Marguerite happened to be there, that was a blessing, because it just was with her the whole time. So I just remember that. And then about Marguerite, that in fact she must have been a strong woman, because when her husband was shot in front of her, and there she was with 4 children, the 4th one being 6 months or 8 months, still a baby. And she picked up the...
she ran the hacienda.
She ran the hacienda 4 years before getting married again and moving back to Switzerland. So, I mean, she was somebody. And I think it seems that she was probably very much happier with her Tala than
Yeah. No, this is clear. Do you have an opinion of why Ludwig played so poor? For example, a hole in his sleeve. He was born into a lot of money and culture and style and so on. Okay, he was eccentric. Obviously the First World War changed him a lot, but he went to extremes to look poor and I don't know. McGuinness said he didn't care about money. He didn't care about anything than himself, his own world. It is not that he propagated it is good to be poor, this not. But why did he want to oppose his family to show that he's different, that he dressed like this and behaved like this?
I think so. And I think he wanted to be sort of undergraduate at Cambridge. And the students there, well, young students in England, they don't exactly dress up. I mean, it's just wanted to fit in. Above all, perhaps not be considered this Austrian or I mean, speaking German being it's a bit delicate in England at times. And I would say, I mean, from my time as a student in England, students dressed rather badly generally.
Okay.
But it's not, he did not want to be a rich Austrian.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, he wanted to build his own image and not depend, not be connected with his family. Yeah. You studied in England yourself, and didn't you work there also for a few years at the beginning? Did anybody address you as part of the family? Was this known that you are grandnephew of Ludwig Wittgenstein? No. Okay. Just asking.
No, but I was a medical student in London, and I worked at one of the teaching hospitals. And I just melted in. I learned. I picked up I spoke English, but after some 6 years, I spoke. Well, the English, in fact, didn't ask me where I came from. They thought my name was odd, and they couldn't pronounce it. But there's a disease with that name, so.
Really? Yeah. Oh.
Sjögren syndrome, nothing to do with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just add a little thing, is that at the time, in the late 50s and beginning of the 60s, when we lived in England, in fact, neither still nor Ludwig's philosophy were so well known. And that's very difficult for people nowadays to realize that it came in the 70s. But before, when we were young, I mean, I know when I came to the Hochheit and I had finished my studies in Paris, and I had never heard about the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, and I didn't like Jugendstil, of course. It came later. I have it here.
May I ask you what you think about the Jewishness of the Wittgenstein family, because Annick and I corresponded a little bit about this.
Expert.
Yeah. Of course, you know, we are here in Vienna, and this is sort of a taboo. First of all, because, you know, Austria doesn't love to talk about Jewishness in principle, but the Wittgensteins were not proud or happy to be of Jewish origins. So they unterdrückt, they put it down all the time. But they are speculations. Now, Ludwig's way of thinking, this analytical, highly creative thinking, whether this has something to do with his Jewish origins. How do you see this whole Jewishness matter?
I think it's one of the bases of the family, but the Wittgenstein were absolutely not the only family to suppress its Jewishness. All families from the high society, which came from who were assimilated families, suppressed it.
Mm-hmm.
That was a normal thing to do. And here we know Monica Nagler.
Monica Nagler, yeah. I know her, yeah.
And I know her husband comes from a family who kept Jewishness in the front line. And one realized, speaking with him, that there is this kind of opposition between the two types of families, the assimilated ones who suppress this Jewishness and have to suppress it also for very tragic reasons, and the ones who are proud of having kept it open. Often they don't practice their religion anymore. They have gone over that time, and Alan has written much about this Gründerzeit. Those families were not happy to talk about it. So I think that's the thing. But for me, what is the strength of those families, in fact, might go back to the Jewishness. And it's a mixture of, if you wanted to survive as a privileged Jewish family and get out of the ghetto, be accepted by the ruling powers, you had to have a correct life, and you had to be very cultivated, to have much culture. And the Jewish way of bringing up children is most interesting, because they, even in the ghettos as well, they really always had a higher level of education than the corresponding social classes, not Jewish. And to live a proper life was a way to survive. In fact, in Germany, there was sometimes some kinds of control in the 19th century. So I think Hermann Wittgenstein, who is a very, very interesting person in the family, he took the step up, out, and out first, and then up by marrying a Victor. And it
was the same sort of family.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Than the Wittgenstein at the time. And what he had very deep in him, he was a very serious man. He had very much culture, and he wanted to live a proper life. And Fanny Victor, who was a very strong woman, except she had the same aims. So those, and that I think it would be very interesting to compare with the non-Jewish families like the Salzer, the
Kuppelwieser.
Kuppelwieser, yeah. Kuppelwieser.
Also those families who intermarried with the Wittgenstein had not this Jewish background, but in fact the children all accepted that thing. The aim is to live a proper life, and you have to have culture, and when you live a proper life and you are highly educated, that was the dangerous thing, because then you know how you should live, but also how other people should live.
Yeah.
And apparently, my mother-in-law told me once something terrible in a way. We were talking, and I said terribly innocently, "Oh," we spoke French, "you are a powerful woman." And it was absolutely horrible for her. It was as if I had said she was a war or something. She said, Annick, I tell you, please, never say that again. Never. What? And she said, do you know, this power, I hate it. That's the Wittgensteins. They have to be powerful. And all my life, I have tried to be kind. And she was extremely generous. In fact, some people didn't find her so kind. I did, my children did, but she was a very strict woman. And in fact, she had, like many of those Wittgenstein, that idea that you have to understand people, to explain why do they do that psychology. And before Freud, it was like that. And the result is that you take power over people.
Yeah, yeah.
And they don't realize it.
Yes, yeah, they don't realize it.
And it's intellectually very much more stimulating than the little talking about the neighbor. But in fact, it can be rather dangerous. But I mean, that's a thing to remember. For her, it was dangerous. Okay.
Your mother-in-law and your mother at the same time, she did one thing very right, in my view. After Ludwig's death, the family still had some of his manuscripts, and I think she was the only one who gave them to Cambridge, to Trinity College. Some others went to the Austrian Library, National Library, or Thomas Tomborough sold one to Oxford. But Ludwig would have wanted, he says this in his testament, Trinity College has to have all his work. And there is still, you know, there is a digitalized version. Bergen University did this. They scanned all of Ludwig's writings, and there is on the title side a small note, property of Clara Sjögren. They have left it on. And yeah, and one can see it, yeah. Well, about the Figdor family, they are not mentioned very often in the correspondence, but this doesn't mean that in the generations after Fanny Figdor that they didn't stay in touch, because one doesn't write obvious things in letters. Yeah, that I met our cousins Figdor. I don't write this because my siblings know it, but in the photograph albums that you donated to the Brenner archive, we used them as illustrations for the family letters. I saw that there were some photos on the Hochreich with some Figdors. I think Victor Figdor, Wilhelm Figdor, and Albert Figdor. This means that the Figdors were guests on the Hochreich, that the families...
Yes, maybe, but one of the Stockert cousins, Franz Stockert, married a Figdor.
Really? I didn't know this.
And we always once said with a smile, he married his aunt.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, because the Figdors are, I think, if I understood you correctly, Hermann Christian made a huge leap up in society, in his development, when he married Fanny, because the Figdor family was richer than the Wittgensteins, and of course they were in Vienna, not in Leipzig. But they were some of the most important art collectors, and
I just, in fact, I read about them in Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Already they were in Kitze, so at the border to Hungary, and being part of very prosperous and well-educated Jewish families of the working for the Esterhazy. And they had done, it's a long story. I've just written about it today, but I'm not going to tell you everything except that what is important for Hermann is that a bit 1790 or something like that, Victor was allowed by the emperor in Vienna to come back to Vienna, and he had a very high position, and his grandfather or great-grandfather of Joachim, the musician.
Yes, yeah, the violinist, yeah.
His mother was a Victor. Joachim was a near cousin to Fanny Victor, much younger, but and this grandfather in Vienna was had high positions, and Wilhelm, his son, became so father-in-law of Hermann, and he was made citizen of Vienna, which for a Jew was quite a thing, because he had been the financial advisor of the Vienna region for many years. His son, the friend of Hermann, also became financial advisor of Vienna. And so when Hermann, in his traveling all around Europe for selling wool, textiles of wool, he met this Gustav Victor, and he was in his 30s, getting 35, and having done very well by himself on the whole. And so there was a sister who wasn't a very easy person. That suited Hermann. She wasn't one of those happy little girls. She could be, but she was a tough woman, I think. Kantig as meaning rights in her. And that's so they came together, and I think that Victor had a lot to do with the success of Hermann afterwards.
Yes.
They cooperated very, very well in business and to bring up children, 11 children, and agreed that you don't talk about Jewishness. You know that, well, no, where is it written? I think it's McGuinness, because meaning doesn't know the right thing there. That when Hermann and Fanny married in Vienna, they were registered as Israelite and Israelitin. And then Hermann took his wife to Leipzig, and there she had to convert. And then they married in the Lutheran church. So they married in Vienna. I don't know if it was at the synagogue or only at the administration. And then it was, and when meaning writes that he converted, then I don't believe it, and McInnes writes that he had heard from people in the family, maybe Salzer or somebody else, that it was said that Hermann converted much earlier as a child, an adolescent.
Mhm, mhm.
Yes, so that's about Jewishness. And this family of 11 children, and Karl is one of them, seem to have been an happy one.
Unhappy.
And
A happy one.
A happy one.
yes,
Yes.
Happy. Happy.
yes, a very happy.
Mhm.
And but well, the next one, Karl's children, when you said that the 8 children were brought up
Strictly? Strictly or hardly?
strictly, I don't believe it. If you read very much about it, you see that the parents didn't Karl interfered much too much on top. You have to go and be an engineer, you have to go and do that. But in details, exactly, it was the stuff.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
It was just music. And they did what they wanted. And I don't, when there is this talk about that they were an unhappy family, so children later on in life, well, there were only 5 then, I don't believe it. From what Andreas' mother said,
Yeah.
of course, they were very difficult people, so you can't have had a smooth evening, you know, everything is fine. But I think they were very close. When you read, in fact, those letters of Ludwig to Helene, and talking about music and cakes, and it's a very funny mixture. He's always going there for Christmas. And the one who revolted already against his father is the only one who dared. It was Paul, musician.
Pianist.
Paul dared to tell his father, Karl, now it's enough. We don't go to school, but we don't know anything. And the father said, what? He was 16 when he said that. And Ludwig was 14 or 13, 14. And the father said, asked them questions. There was a kind of test, and realized that they didn't know anything. And that's why they were sent. And Paul was always the one who didn't accept, I think, the kind of taboos and diktat of the family. And as he was at least as strong as the others. And when there was this biography about him of Alexander Vrome, I remember we read it with huge interest. We learned a lot because it's archives which had not been around in Europe, I think. And it was another perspective, and it was very interesting. But what is absolutely wrong is the title. Why isn't this biography called Paul Wittgenstein? And as you know,
what is it called?
Family at War.
Family.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I felt mad when I saw this title. I thought, yes, it's typical of an editing firm, an editor who want to sell the book all over the world. Paul Wittgenstein, okay, musicologist will read it. We will miss it. But Family at War and the Wittgenstein, then, and he didn't know anything about Ludwig, Alexander. So he knew extremely well his field. And he had one perspective on the family, the one of Paul, who at war with the family. So he could have called it Paul Wittgenstein, Paul the musician at war with the Wittgensteins.
With his family.
Yeah.
No, yes.
You know, this book is very vilified, the Alexander War book, because of the title, most people think it is about the family, and then
Yes.
it is a missed opportunity to write, because there are interesting episodes there that are not in other books, as for example the crashing of this family, the crashing of their relationship in 1938, where Paul plays a big role, in the sense that then he separates from his siblings, and perhaps this is the reason why Andreas never met him, because they didn't meet until the end of their lives. But and I have to tell you, Stefan and Florian told me, if we can find out, if more can be said about this sad episode. I mean, it is sad, but many families went through similar episodes, especially rich families. Give their money to the Nazis, emigrate or not emigrate, whatever. And the Stockards would agree to, would like to see this in the open. Nobody is blamed, everybody's dead anyway. But to make it clear what exactly happened, because we get addressed by some people beginning to read about Wittgenstein. Oh, how could this family deal with the Nazis? They had no other choice, but then they were so rich they could go to Switzerland. Why didn't they? Why did they insist on staying in Vienna? I mean, the sisters. This is a very interesting psychological episode, I think, as well. And then what Alexander War describes, the negotiations in America, where the Stomborough boys come into play. This says a lot about the psychology of this family. And when I read, I'm very interested to know about the Stomborough boys. I know Pierre Stomborough and Françoise very well, and they are lovely people, and it's not their fault about their father and uncle. But it seems clear to me that Margaret Stomborough, a highly intelligent woman, produced two sons of not the same intelligence. Okay, it's überfordert is the word, no? But it's interesting to me, because this is all part of the family, and they all were in contact also with Ludwig. They didn't like Ludwig, as far as I know, the Stoneborough boys, but he was their uncle, and they gave some interviews after his death about about having known him. And then there is, of course, the Kundmangasse. Yeah, a lot of psychological detail to explain why things happened as they happened. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to ask you. Do you have this book?
No.
Oh,
I think we have it.
What?
this is the family letters.
Non, peut-être pas.
Non, j'ai pas vu.
Non.
Oh, this is the family letters, the second edition that I did with Brian a few years ago, and yeah, I'm very passionate about the relationships inside the family. And Brian put inside never previously published letters between Ludwig and Paul. And, you know, they had this sort of correspondence now called the Nonsense Collection. They sent each other cuttings from newspapers, making fun on the news. They made fun of Einstein, of course, of Alban Berg, because this all was very foreign to them, too modern, yeah. But this is interesting, what they were laughing at, and part of it is in this book. Yeah. A bit arrogant, the boys, yeah.
Book is German or English?
This is German. This is the original, but I'll show you. This is the English edition.
Family letters. And where is it printed?
Also 2 years ago, I think, or last year, very recently.
Brian. Yes, Brian McGuinness, Peter Winslow.
Peter Winslow is the translator, but actually Brian translated them. Yeah. Anyway, but this is a little bit shorter. The German edition is more complete and with more footnotes, because Bloomsbury wanted a more popular book with not too much heavy detail, so that more people can buy the book. Yeah, and Brian was not too happy. The German edition is just as it is. Yeah, I'm afraid I have taken a lot of your time, and just wanted to say that I would love if you are ready also in future to meet sometime, so online, because there's a lot to talk about, and perhaps I can prepare also a bit better regarding the 19th century. I wanted to tell you there is a historian here in Vienna. His name is Georg Gaugusch, and he's a genealogist of all the Jewish families, assimilated or not, but Jewish families. And he has a huge book in 3 volumes, alphabetically, all the families. Only the 3rd volume has not been published yet, and they are the Wittgensteins, of course. But I met him, and it is very interesting, because as a historian, he sees everything with detachment, and especially the Wittgensteins a little bit with, not irony, but he relativiert many things. He said they were not too special. They were just a part of a class at the time. They had a lot of money, and this is also about the music. they had a lot of money and made this salon and invited the best people to the salon. It is very interesting. And also about the Jewishness, he said there was nothing like assimilated for that generation. It was all a question of business. For example, Karl Wittgenstein, but also his brothers. I mean, Karl did things forbidden by his father. He married a half Jewish lady, while all his brothers married outside of Jew. But all of them made business with Schei, Palais Schei, you know, certainly in Vienna, was the Schei family, Palais Schei. This is Goethe-Denkmal, Albertina, and Palais Schei is a huge block. Karl Wittgenstein had his office there. Louis Wittgenstein lived there and died in Palais Schei, and Ludwig and Leopoldine were registered. So a lot of Wittgensteins in a very Jewish palace, and the Schei family was not even assimilated. They were Jewish. And this historian told me it was nothing. All this about assimilation came with the Nazis, with the later ideology and understanding. In their time, they were just making business, and whatever was good for business was good for the families. There were no prejudices in this sense. Yeah, and I don't know, perhaps I could ask him to join us sometime, because he's an encyclopedia. He's fascinating, and nobody, neither Alan or the other Wittgenstein people, have worked with him, because he's liar. He's a dilettante as a hobby. His history is a hobby, but he's a perfect historian. He's owner of a big shop next to the Vienna State Opera. If you remember, there's a shop for luxury gentlemen clothing. You have Café Mozart, and on the corner there is, I can't remember the name. Anyway, this man, this historian, inherited the shop, and this brings him the money. And in his spare time, he's doing history on a very high level. So it is very inspiring to talk to such people in Vienna, because you understand so many more connections. For example, the fig doors, you know, the Palais fig door, which was sold very, very early, I think during the First Republic. It is the Palais behind the Burgtheater, which is now Palais Liechtenstein. The Liechtenstein family bought it, and now it is embassy, and it was Palais Victor originally when it was built. Yeah.
Albert Victor.
Sorry?
Was the one collecting this.
Yeah, Albert Victor, yeah.
You know, I'm just now very much in contact with granddaughter of Elisabeth Stockert, Eliška, and Geneviève Guérito, who has just in Montreal, she and her husband, they are French, but they live in Montreal. And she has just written a book, but in a novel way, about her two Victors, grandmothers, who are both have been educated in Brno. It's a part of the Victor's family who went to Brno, but they had very much contact with Vienna. And she is German speaking as much as French speaking, probably English. And she knows an awful, very much so. She's a woman of 40, something like that. she might be interesting to contact.
Guéritaux, I was in email contact with Madame Guéritaux at one point. Florian Stockert had given me the email a few years ago, but I didn't know that she's doing research as well.
No, that's the daughter. She is now married. She's called Dodin. But her brother, François, a mathematician, married a Czech, a woman who lives in Vienna and speaks. They live partly in Vienna, partly in France, both of them mathematician on a high level, especially. And they probably know quite a lot as well.
About the Victor.
About the Victor, but Geneviève Dodin Guéritaux in Montréal, in fact, she is Wittgenstein like you.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
Her mother is born Stockert. The grandparents are one Stockert, one Victor.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, there is a whole Wittgenstein universe in Vienna.
Yes, and it means it's those related families. They are very much related, and they have so very much the same type of life, of culture. So.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't want to stop, but it has been long enough, and I hope you will give me some time again. Yeah. May I only ask how is life in Sweden with the coronavirus? Because here we hear that Sweden is very leisure and.
I'm not so sure. We live in a very fortunate way, near the capital, but outside, surrounded by lakes and trees. And so it's very easy to be isolated here. And we have nice sons who do the shopping.
Yeah.
And much more.
And more, yes.
Good, yeah.
Good talk to you.
Okay, thank you very much, and we'll stay in touch.
Hope to see you again.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Philippe. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.